whiteboard here. Oh, sorry, it's very loud. It's from the assembly earlier. Sorry. Okay, there we go. All right, guys, for that first one, just quickly down here, I can all one line. I just move into like a bit on the screen. That's why but it's supposed to go in one long line, right? And if your line is not long enough, then you can carry on underneath. So for the first one, it's just 1 interest rate. That's the revision number 6 as well. Okay, there was just 1 interest rate of 10% semi-annually or biannually. I can't remember what word they used there, but twice a year. Then they said you are investing money, and then after 4 years, this person was withdrawing money, and then after a further 2 years, there was another deposit. Okay, so then, yeah, that's the timeline that I drew, and you guys can take a look at my working there. So obviously, we just had 1 interest bracket for all 3 of these amounts because there was just 1 interest rate, right? For the first one, remember we see this as 3 separate transactions, even though it's going into the same account. So the 60,000 for 10 years, it's twice a year, so that's why it's 10 times 2. Right, 10 years multiplied by 2 times a year. For the 5,000, it's a withdrawal, so we minus 5,000. And from T4 to T10, that's 6 years. Okay, so that's why it's 6 times 2, 6 years and twice a year. And then for the 8,000, that was another deposit, so that was a plus 8,000. Again, the same interest rate. If it's from T6 to T10, all we find is that in 4 years, right? So to the power of 4 times 2, so 4 years and then twice a year. Did I get this answer? Okay, good. All right, so that is just when you type that into the calculator, that's the first one. Okay, any questions on the first one? Oh, okay. Is number 7. Now, number 7 was similar, but now you did have 2 types of interest, 2 different interest rates. So they said for the first 2 years, it was just 10% compounded annually, right? So that's just 10 over 100. And then after 2 years, it changed to 9.5% quarterly. That's 9.5 over 400. Again, it was an original investment, an extra deposit, and a withdrawal. All right, so you can just look at my T value there, that's the different years. Now remember, again, we just do a separate calculation for each amount that's been added or withdrawn. All right, so for the 8,000, that is 10 years in total, but you have to do 2 years at 10%, and then 8 years at 9.5%. Okay, so that's why there are 2 brackets for that one. 2 years at 10%, and then 8 years at 9.5% quarterly, but so that's only 8 times 4 times a year. And then the other 2 amounts, guys, actually had nothing to do with that first interest rate, right? Because the second amount was deposited when a new interest rate was already active, like the product was in use. So it's just that 1 interest bracket. If we're going from T5 to T10, that's 5 years, right? So 5 times 4. The last one, if you're going from T7 to T10, that is 3 years. So 3 times 4. Okay, and the answer was 16,000. I will go with these questions, guys. All right. We are going to do, there's one more that we must mark, and then and I move on. Okay, that was number 6 from the revision exercise. Sorry. I can actually, let me just move this so that I can zoom in a bit because I feel like there's space there. I'll do that. Sorry, my bad. That's the timer and the question on one page. Okay. So there, again, we just had 1 interest rate. So this one was again a bit easier than the number 7 that we saw. It was just a 1 interest bracket for all of them. You just have to look at the years that you were working with. Sorry, this glare is now. Okay, there we go. So the first one was for 8 years, right? So because it was quarterly, you're going to say to the power of 8 times 4. The second one was deposited after 2 years, so at T2, so that's 6 years. So that's why that exponent is 6 times 4. And then the last one, the withdrawal, was at 5 years, so that's 3 years between T5 and T8. So that's why it's 3 times 4. Okay, and that's basically, oh, what is it about? Now guys, a time-saving trick that I just want to show you quickly is, I'm not sure if we worked with saving values on the calculator. Stories, have we done that yet? Okay, I think we maybe looked at it once, but it's quite useful for these types of questions because we have the same bracket 3 times, right? So instead of typing that bracket in 3 times, you can actually type it in once, store it, and then use the letter. So if we're seeing that it's 1 plus 9.5 over 400, you can type that in. 1 plus 9.5 over 400 equals, and then remember how do we store? You press shift, and then that button that has STO above it, you press that button, and now you can store it as any letter. I'll store it as A. Okay, so you just press the button with an A on top. So now instead of typing 12,500 and the bracket to the power of 8 times 4, we can do this. 12,500 bracket alpha A, because that's what we saved that bracket as. Close bracket to the power of 8 times 4, which you can work out really. Plus 10,000 bracket alpha A, close bracket to the power of 6 times 4 minus 8,000 alpha A to the power of, what's that, 12. Okay, and you do get the same answer. So that's maybe something that you can do if you see that the same bracket is coming up a bunch of times. You can save that bracket as a letter on the calculator, and you don't have to spend as much time actually typing it off. Okay, but that's good. A suggestion, you don't have to do that. Okay, guys, I'm going to do a question from the textbook quickly. I didn't print another one. We're just going to do one of the questions that are in here. So I think it's exercise 2 again. I have to just add that one. Oh. This is on. Sorry, I just quickly. Oh. All right, let's please write exercise 2. Do it underneath here. So sorry that we're jumping back and forth now between exercises, but exercise 2, page 249. I would like us to do number 8. Okay, I wonder, maybe we should write this out. Sorry, it's a bit of a pain, but it's nice to have it in your book so that you can highlight and so on. Just for this one, let's actually write it down because it is a bit more complicated than the ones we've done so far. And if you get something like this in a test or exam, I really want you guys to be able to do it. Okay, so if mom purchased a car 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Okay. So in the book, they're talking about a deposit that they don't mention at the beginning. So I wonder. Okay, that's fine. After paying the deposit. Been waiting, I've been waiting. Okay, I'm just gonna write the rest a little bit shorter because a lot. So interest, I just listed, so it was 10% per annum. They wrote it like in a longer than what you sentence, but we're just listing the interest rates. Compounded monthly. First 3 years. Per annum. I think you can have that covered. Okay, guys, so there's a lot going on here. Basically, if we're looking at what they're asking us for, they're asking for the original loan amount. Now, in our normal formula, the A equals 1 plus I, we have in what is the original amount always in that formula? It's P, right? So they're actually asking us to calculate P here. Okay, but it's not as straightforward as the ones that we did on the first day, where they say this thing, you have to pay back this amount, what was borrowed in the beginning. Because now their payments being made and all sorts of stuff happening. Okay, so we do have to use a timeline for this question. I just want us to write here next to the question, they're actually asking us to calculate P. Sometimes in these types of questions, they introduce an X as well. Okay, you'll see in the one that you're going to do for me afterwards, they're talking about a final payment of X per annum. Okay, so then obviously you'll use the X that they gave you. Yeah, they're asking for the original amount, they're asking for P. Now we're going to set up our timeline like we did yesterday, right? With our final calculation, that's going to be a bit different. So let's see what's going on here. We purchased a car 5 years ago after paying a deposit. He took out a loan, blah, blah, blah. He paid off the loan with 2 payments, 30,000 Rand after 2 years. That's going to be T2. Hey. His final payment of 113,000 and some more stuff there, which he made 5 years after taking out the loan. So at T5, he's going to make that second final payment, which they call it. Okay, they're giving us 2 interest rates. The first one, 10% monthly for the first 3 years. So from T0 to T3, it was that interest rate, right? Then at T3, so underneath that line, it changed. So this new interest rate is going to write underneath. And obviously the car that he got when he took out that loan, that is at T0. Okay, so if you want to, you can say there, this purchased a car, that is at T0. And that is now the amount that we need to calculate. We need to calculate what loan did he take out, because when you take the car from the dealership, immediately you owe money to them. Right, so that is T0, that's what's happening there. They want us to calculate how much he actually owes them. So let's draw a timeline, guys, taking into account these 4 lines that we look at. We have T0. The next thing is T2. Then we're going to have T3 and then T5. Okay, so those are the times that we have to have on this timeline. So we're going to have T0. And we're going to have T2. T3. And T5. I can space them out a bit more if you want to. Oops. T5. And then I just draw my line there. And move this a bit more into the so guys, I don't want you to feel put off by the fact that there's a lot of information here. It is quite useful if you just, like on the question, because obviously in a test you're going to get the question paper, right? And you can write on top of it. So if you just do like what I did here, if you write like, okay, that's T0, that's T2, that's T5, that's T3, and then you can kind of put them in order from there. Okay, that's quite useful instead of like having to read through it a million times every time you're setting up your timeline and so on. Okay, now what's happening at T0? We don't actually know what amount is being taken out of the loan, right? So I'm just going to put a PO. Actually, we need to put our interest rates first. Remember, interest rates always first. So the first one was 10% monthly. So that is 10 over 1200, right? And then that was for the first 3 years. So after 3 years, it changed to 11.5% per annum. And guys, if they're just saying per annum, what does that mean? Over 100, right? Annually, once a year. Okay, so at T3, it's changing to 11.5 over 100. Okay, now I'm going to put my P over there. All right, we don't know what amount was taken out of the loan for the loan. Okay, so far we've only done questions, timeline questions with investments, right? So when you put in an amount of money into the account, when you add the deposit, you say plus. When you withdrew money, so money that's going to make your investment less, we put a minus, right? Now let's quickly think about these payments on this loan. If I'm saying P, right, this loan, however much money is taken out as a loan, going to 5 years, the end of 5 years. Do we agree that that loan amount is going to be bigger after 5 years than it is at the beginning? Right? But what do I do to the loan amount when I make a payment to it or on it? What happens to the loan amount? This is pretty big. If I'm owing 100,000 rand and now I pay 20,000 rand, what happens to the actual loan? It's decreasing, right? So yeah, it's decreasing. Okay, so we're minusing. So now these payments that this guy is making, for these payments, that 50,000 rand is going to decrease the amount that he owes. So for this 50,000, I'm going to put a minus in front of it. Okay, because the actual loan amount, the actual amount that he owes is going to be less by 50,000 rand. And then at T5, the final amount there is going to be minus that. Okay, so loan payments are actually making the loan less. Let's see, that was at T2 minus 50,000. We're going to take that to the end as well. And then that final payment, guys, was at T5, right? It was 113,582.40. Yes. You can do it that way around, but I prefer to do it like this. But you can do it like that. Okay, now guys, after that final payment, what did you still owe? If you've made a final payment on the loan, you still owe money. Yeah, I think we can assume if you've made your final payment, you don't owe anything. So what we're going to do here is after this amount has been taken off, the value of the loan is going to equal 0. Okay, so that's a bit different from what we've done before. The actual setting up of the calculation is going to be exactly the same. We're going to say, okay, this loan amount is going to the end of 5 years. So after 5 years, I need to add 2 interest brackets, right, to see how much I would actually owe after 5 years. But then, of course, we're paying 50,000 rand off. So we're taking away that 50,000 rand as well as the interest that you would have had to pay if you didn't make that payment. And then we're going to minus that last bit. Now, guys, is there going to be any interest on this last bit if I'm making it right at the end? Okay, no, right? It's just going to be minus this, and then that's going to equal 0. Because after the last payment, he doesn't owe anything anymore. Okay, so I'm just going to make a note here. They called it a final payment, right? That's how we know that once that payment has been made, he doesn't owe anything. Therefore, loan is paid off. Maybe I should add the owes nothing. I hope that kind of makes sense. That's why I wanted to do this example where you can see when you're making payments on a loan, it does have to equal 0. In the example that you're going to do in class, they're saying that the final payment is X. So this is the amount that you must calculate. Right, so you'll see when you do that one as well. Okay, now guys, like I said, we're gonna set this actual calculation just like we did in class. The only difference is we're gonna now say this with interest minus this with interest minus this with interest is equal to 0. Right? In the homework, we have to calculate 8. So let me just go back to what we were doing. We calculated the final amount. So there was no like final thing. They didn't tell us what the final amount was, right? We were calculating the final amount. So we didn't actually have to set up an equation to solve for A. We could just use our formula here. Now they're asking us to find P. Not the final amount, the original amount. Okay, the final amount actually in this case is 0. That's what you owe at the end of the whole thing. Okay. So we're going to set it up like this, guys. We're going to say P, the loan amount. Remember, we see each of these 3 transactions as separate things happening, even though it's all in one account. Okay. So P, we're going to add 2 into brackets. It's going to be 1 plus 10 over 1200. And that's 3 years, right? That interest rate. So to the power of 3 times, how many times a year? Monthly? 12. New bracket for the second interest rate. 1 plus 11.5 over 100. How many years from T3 to T5? 2. And that's once a year, right? So you can write 2 times 1 if you want. That's 2. Now, guys, if you have space, you can also carry on writing next to it. Okay, it's all one equation that we pick up. I'm just going to do my minus 30,000 here in the next line. Our first interest rate, because it's minus 50,000 here at T2, from T2 to T3, that's just 1 year, right? So the first interest bracket is going to be 1 plus 10 over 1200 to the power of 1 year times 12 times a year. Then we're going to have the same second interest bracket. Okay, it's again from T3 to T5. So again, 1 plus 11.5 over 100 to the power of 2. And now we need to say minus 113,582 Rand and 40 cents. And that all is equal to 0. The loan is paid off in full. Now this does require a bit more work, guys, because what are we actually trying to find here? What value? P, right? We want to find that value. Can I just type everything in and that's going to give me P? No, right? I actually have a negative term here and a negative term there. That's all equal to 0. And I still have a whole bunch of brackets there. So guys, this is an equation that we have to solve. Right? If I move this negative term, do we agree that this whole thing is one term? Right? Negative. Then we have 50,000 and a bracket and a bracket. That's all one term, guys. If I move this negative term over to that 0 side, it's going to become positive. Right? Do we agree? And what about this one? Negative 113,000 when I move it? Also positive. And I'm going to be left with this first term, which has the P. Okay, so this is a lot of writing, but we do have to do it, unfortunately. We're going to keep the P term here on the left-hand side on its own. I'm just going to do that multiplication now. 3 times 12 is 36. And then you have your second bracket. Right, so I'm keeping that term on the left so that will solve for P. Everything else you need to move to the other side, and because they're both negative terms on the left, when I move them to the right, they're going to become positive. So I'm going to have this whole 30,000 term. Just going to move it a bit to the side. Sorry. So I can put in that second bracket. Okay, that's the one term that I moved. And then this negative term must also go to that side. It's going to become plus. Okay, so I'm just going to write underneath here because I've run out of space on the side. I'm going to write plus 113,000. Yes. That's fine. Okay, now guys, before I talk about getting rid of these brackets, let's just type this into the calculator and see what we get. Because I don't want to write that whole thing out again. Yeah, that's a bit much. So let's do that quickly. 30,000, and then that first bracket, and then the second bracket. Plus that 113,000. So I'm just working out what that is. So I'm getting 154,784,6071. That's the whole thing that I'm getting. I'll calculate that. But again, I want to solve for P. So what do I do to get rid of these two brackets that are next to P? What am I doing with these two brackets? I am multiplying by them. What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing, right? So we're going to have to do this whole thing divided by both of these brackets. Now guys, in a test or exam, you wouldn't have to write that down, but because it's the first example at this time, let's actually write that down so that you don't forget. So therefore, P is going to be equal to that value over 1 plus both of these brackets. Okay, we're nearly there, guys. So now I'm just going to take my calculator to the office. So there, I'm literally just going to type divided by, all right, and it's going to give me that. Or maybe we should use the fraction button. It's actually really fraction. Now, because I just want to use my previous answer, I can just press the. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to hold too many things at once. I can just type the answer button there, and it will use the final answer that we calculate. All right, so that, and then I'm going to type in those two brackets at the bottom. But if you just want to use the division symbol, that's also fine. You'll get the same answer, no problem. Okay, I am getting an answer of 92,348 rand and 44 cents. Let me know if anyone got a different answer there. Anyone get that? Usually for these questions, we do try and give you that like a nice answer so that it's like 100,000 or something. Exercise 2, number 8. I'm just checking. Yeah, it is that. 9, 2, 3, 4, 8, 4. Okay, guys, so a bit of a spin on the ones that we've done so far, but I hope that that does make sense. That if they're asking you to calculate a different value than just A, You're gonna have to set up an equation. All right, but usually it is the case that it's like a loan that you're paying off and then it's equal to zero at the end. Okay, so we'll ask something different. Yeah, I would like you to try and do number 9 now on your own. And then I'm going to give you just a few more questions from the revision exercise, so you can just practice all the different finance stuff together. This is in your paper 2, all right? So today I want to read the subject specifically like that, along with tree graphs and geometry. So like I said before, I keep saying it, but it is important. This is a nice section to bring your marks up. Okay, so let's try and focus. I know it's late in the day and we're all tired, but I want us to revise geometry tomorrow and some algebra stuff. So we need to do this now. Okay, so I'm just writing down what you are doing now. Exercise 2, it's the same exercise that we did now on page 249, number 9. Are you guys all done copying that down? So number 9, it's similar to the one that we just did, not exactly the same, but you can look at it for some guidance. And then from the revision exercise, I'm just going to write down a few. Okay, guys, number 12 here is just like the one that we just did. Where they are giving you to say you're taking out a loan, you're making payments, and then what was the original loan. So number 12 is just like this one. Number 9 is slightly different. And then 2, 3, and 5 are just from the topics that we did before. Okay, not the timeline stuff like the depreciation, the effective interest rate, that stuff. Yeah. Oh, it looks like it's finished. And you can go to the start and start. Just take those new cards there. There's a table outside the main door of the store. You can just grab it with it all. Thank you. From the art room, he's going now. We'll have to wait for him. Oh, no problem. All right, guys, should I put number 9 on the board? I hope you can read it. Let's see here. I'll just zoom in. Zoom in once, see if that helps. Is that okay? I don't think that is easy.